Thank you for joining me. I'm Weston Jolly, and today is November 2nd. Actually, it's the 11th. This broadcast was supposed to go off on the 2nd, but due to some health issues, I wasn't able to participate in that way. But today's the 11th, and we're still going to get it out in this particular moment. I'm very grateful for you to be here with me because I want to talk about love and detachment. Now, love as a subject matter is huge, gigantic, actually. But this concept of being attached in love is something that we're taught. And I wanted to give some information to share with you so that you can really become aware of how we are conditioned to love and ultimately what we want to do in terms of becoming aware of how we can go beyond the conditioned love that we've learned. And I say learned in terms of what we've been taught. Now, all love, every aspect of love that you have learned in this physical realm has been conditioned, which is, I give you this and you give me that. Now, in unconditional love, we want to get used to the idea that it's just free-flowing. Now, this is a simple concept. It's a very large topic, but I want to be very connected to this one particular word, which is how to love without attachment. And the attachment part is where we go to grip on something. And when I think of an attachment, especially in the love category, romantically speaking, lots of times when we have a love or we go to have a love or we become aware of a love, we go to what I'll call put a picket fence around it. We go to encirculate our love, my love, as something that I want to protect. And I want you to see that we go to participate. And if you heard what I actually said, I spoke of my love. And that's something I want you to really be conscious of because, of course, my choice to engage in love doesn't have to come through a boundary or a limitation of this picket fence where I need to, it's mine, I need to protect it, and we put a moat around it or a gate or, again, a white picket fence. So if we become aware that love doesn't have to come with attachment, even though that we've been conditioned to participate with almost every aspect of our love. The reason that this would be so important is because if we can remember, not necessarily learn, to love without an attachment, it's a difficult process from what you've been taught, but ultimately it's the only way to go because in your choice to really participate in any kind of true love, then it enables you to be seen, I'll call it at the highest of levels. Now, this topic may bleed off into other topics, but I want to kind of keep us right on tune to, again, how to love without being attached, again, without having to put a border around it. So why the conditioning? Meaning, why is it that we come into this space, I was going to say genetic space, and perhaps that's the right term for it, to come into this physical embodiment and to participate in something that's opposite of what we really are. I mean, we come from, of course, unconditional love. So why would we come to participate in a limited, constrained form? Furthermore, why would we continue to teach it? Meaning, why would we do that for ourselves, and why would we do that for other people as well, specifically our children? It's a great question, and one that I want you to really contemplate, because if you're willing to accept that this conditional love that perhaps you've been participating in has created a limit, then it enables you to do something much, much greater than, of course, being constrained to this is my love. And of course, I can't share, and sometimes it becomes competitive, doesn't it? That this aspect of my love, I can't love someone else. And sometimes this happens even in the same family, where we have, I can remember my birth family, where there was an idea through my mom that my dad's love for his sons was competitive to that which was her love. Well, if you see that for what it is, it's not just kind of attached. It's filled with all kinds of attachment. And if you grow up under that atmosphere, of course, which I did, it can be quite confusing. I mean, you can wonder if it's okay for me to be the child thereof And maybe I'm thinking, consciously or not thinking, that I need to stay under the radar based upon my mom needing to be in first position, thinking like a mortgage, that she needs to be in the first position to have the love that she, has with my dad. And suddenly I need to remain down or hold myself down. Now, in that choice, that conditioned choice, then of course it can make me smaller. And I'm doing it on purpose because I want to be less than I truly am, in an effort for my mom to be okay in her relationship, and the idea that I offer a threat, a competitive threat. Now I'm speaking of myself, of course, but I see this a lot with many of you, where we have these kinds of conditions that we learn, and we get very, very focused. We become so used to the fact that this is how we're looking, that this is everything is done through this very small portal. We just assume, especially through the mind, that this is it. This is the only means in which we can love. And of course, when we go to create relationship, we often create the very thing that we don't want. We have limited ourselves, lowered ourselves, and these are all attachments, right? So that we can honor that perhaps this means something that we want to, again, break out of. And so being free of our attachments to love is, in one sense, very, very simple, because it is. But because of the conditioning, specific to your conditioning, which is individualistic, and we should honor that, we want to honor the fact that you don't have to be limited to whatever you've been exposed to. Now, let's just say that you grew up in a family that was perfect, and that there was just total unconditional love. Even having said that, the conditioning of where we grew up in the world is still going to be limited in terms of what is okay and what's not okay in terms of your choice to love. And it's interesting that this is such a, to me it's a very fun topic, because this topic is what the world wants most, meaning we want to participate in exuding our love and, of course, in receiving our love at the highest of our capacity or ability. And yet through conditioning, we become afraid. Now, conditioning, of course, is always going to reference the past, right? It's always going to be something that is previous. And it can be previous to my lifetime here, and it can go for the lifetimes beyond that. But you should be aware that when you have a thought that's conditioned, that should always be in your mind that this is something that's taken place historically, in this life perhaps, and through many countless experiences. But even that being true, so what? Meaning it has nothing to do with the price of tea in China. You don't have to be limited based upon these previous experiences. And if you are, then we're running down the same path, meaning we're going around and around and around, wanting to participate in true romantic love oftentimes, without necessarily giving ourselves permission to break out into the full love that we want to offer, in the idea that if we do that, this is an attachment again, that if I do that, then I'm going to be hurt. Meaning if I love this strongly or this significantly, it's somehow going to be used against me, so I would even go into an invulnerable state. So even the concept of being in an invulnerable state is an attachment. And these are all things that are done through, of course, the perceived me, the lower self me. And this is something that we want to appreciate as a part of our being here, but we don't want to be continuing this participation of limitation. So when I speak of divine love or unconditional love, we're talking about infinite love, right? And yet you cannot understand that through an attachment to the finite mind. I really want you to comprehend that, because that part's really, really important. You can't participate in infinite love if you are only allowing yourself to come from a finite place, in essence, a very limited place. And when I say finite, I'm talking about extremely limited, based upon my perceived experiences, those things that have been taught to me, and of course, these are all pieces of attachment and the perceived me, in terms of you learn how to love based upon how mom and dad participated in love, assuming that you had an active mom and dad and a whole family, meaning an undivorced family. And even if you didn't, you learn love, and if you grew up in a foster home, from others, meaning studying or watching others in terms of how they participate in attributes of love. And what we do is we duplicate that. So, and it has an effect, meaning if I came from a foster home, my conditioning of loving might be extremely different than what it is today, based upon the family that I grew up with. And of course, if I grow up in your family, it might be very different than the foster home / my family. And that's something that we, again, want to appreciate, but we don't get lost in. Because if we continue to be attached only through this exclusive chain, the familial chain, the branches of our tree, right, in terms of our genetics, in terms of being here, then we severely limit ourselves. And of course, my whole presentation is one to create awareness and then show you literally how that we can expand into something entirely different than what we've been doing. How to love without having an attachment. So we have lots of structures with love, meaning we have brotherly love, we have sisterly love, we have love that we have for an animal, we have love for our teachers, we have love for our country, we have love for our would-be partners. And even from the deepest aspects of intimate love, where we're literally engaging in intimate sexual activity, there's often still, consciously or not, we're holding on to all of these pieces of the past energetically, and we're repeating that conditionally in these intimate relationships. And so it's very important for you to understand, if you want to have certainly an elevated intimate relationship, and if you're trying to find a relationship or that you're looking for something different than what has been the patterns of the past, this is the how. Meaning we have to be able to love without necessarily being attached to what was, and again, that's the past. And we need to be able to break that. And so the breaking that is really important. And of course, if we're going to infinite love, we have to let go of the finite mind. And I want you to hear that, because if we're trying to love through the mind, it's impossible. I mean, what am I going to do in terms of me trying to connect with you from my mind's perspective? It's hollow at best. And you should understand this, that this mind, I'm pointing to my head, that I have is alive because of this battery pack, this body. So as soon as this battery pack, no longer offers me the juice, the energy to my mind, it will die. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm going to die. It just means that my mind will cease to exist. And that part of us is what you and I become, of course, very familiar with, and we become very attached to it. So in this COVID-19 spiritual retreat that I've been participating in, it's been brought to my awareness again how much identity I have created with this embodiment, which is not weird, it's normal. And yet, as I talked about in the last presentation, in the last video that we did last month, we talked about how to become much more present in the moment. And if we're going to do that, especially from a loving perspective, we can't be in the moment and offering love with one another if we're attached to some particle or some piece of the past. Now, this gets even funner, because if you've participated in love, girlfriends, boyfriends, and different experiences, perhaps even sexual experiences, and we remain attached to those, we literally carry that attachment. Think of, I'm using a coaster, like an article that we go to wear. And this piece can be, anywhere within our body. And we want to become aware that if we're attached to that, we're, of course, recreating cyclic patterns of basically the same thing. So that's why we want to become aware of how to love without necessarily pulling in the attachments of the past. And so we have to be conscious, not kind of conscious, super conscious. So what does it take for you to remember how to love without having to go to the conditions or the perspectives or the stories, right? How many times do we give the story of, when I opened up my heart, that this person didn't like me or this person didn't like me, and then at one point we get to the fifth time of this revolution of the same story. We're now creating a predictive future, right? We're going to create the sixth relationship like this, and the seventh relationship like this, and the eighth relationship like this, because we're still regurgitating the old story, which is important for you to see, because again, these are attachments. If we let go, think of a helium balloon with a tether. When we let go of the tether, then suddenly we have the opportunity to do something different. Now, your mind is going to share with you that somehow that's extremely dangerous based upon this attribute of the past. Of course, the mind has everything to do with the perceived self. And if it goes beyond this realm, meaning beyond this particular experience as in this lifetime, there can be complications. So if you were, beheaded for your choice to love unconditionally because that was not the law of the land, or that wasn't accepted, or that wasn't approved of because of a mom, dad, king, or whomever, you can appreciate how that would create a difficulty for you to be open to love in this realm. So instead of being, held back behind, some kind of wall, and again, think of the wall as, again, a layer of condition. We want to be able to identify the wall so that we can, again, either lower it, or at one point we can literally, remove it, that we can just take the wall and it doesn't have to exist because it's not important. We don't need to participate in any act of love holding on to a condition. So what does this mean? I mean, what does this look like? And I thought it would be really fun for me to actually channel this. And so it's going to get pretty deep probably, which it always does when we channel. But ultimately, I want you to really feel the messages. When I say feel, not just necessarily just with your body, but the entirety of what's being shared, so that you can really understand what it's being talked about in terms of the subject matter. And then, of course, I will give some further conclusion to what's been said so that it can be for the remembrance. So let me start channeling. In your choice to become aware of who you are and what you've come here to do, you do not need to be predeterminedly affixed or attached to those things based upon previous experiences. Your choice to become aware is something that you can exercise, of course, at any time. And your choice to do so in this moment, realizing that you don't have to be careful about your choice to love, has a direct influence on how we, that would be described as Source, can exchange with you, which is, of course, the very nature of who we are and who you are. If you create this constraint, or in essence, this boundary, this limitation, or you have, let's say, one barrier or many barriers based upon your choice, consciously or unconsciously, this is something that prevents us, of course, from having even more direct access with you. And certainly it has a direct effect upon how you interrelate with other people. If you understand that this is something that you don't need to participate in continually, then you can reveal yourself in terms of really allowing yourself to be seen as you are. This choice is significant. This choice to exist in a detached form, not necessarily even claiming perhaps your birth name or even the family genealogy or all the conditions thereof, is something that you can do. It doesn't mean that you have to give up these relationships, is that you don't have to participate in them in the way that they were done before. This gives you an opportunity to exist in a different way, certainly from an energetic standpoint. As you choose to exist in this way, it, of course, draws to you others, especially in the human form, in a way that is, of course, very genuine. If this is something you desire. It does mean the encouragement for you to give yourself permission to be ultimately who you are, which from most of you, if not all of you, this is what you've come here to express. Wanting to participate in your true self, your highest self, in the very loving, the highest potential of who you are in this physical embodiment. But there is story, and these stories become heavy, and these stories become something that oftentimes people get locked or held down upon, which is something to acknowledge, but it doesn't have to continue to be as you go forward. Therefore, we're wanting to give you continued encouragement that you can release these said attachments to allow yourself to become free. For example, each one of you was tethered as you came into this birth form, having the scar of that tether specific to the belly button to mom in terms of the placenta. Having that understanding, that cord was cut, that tether was cut, so that you could be free to exist as the human being that you are, separate from mom, who's the one who offered you this being state, this whole state as a human being. In your choice to realize that this cord has been cut, meaning nobody is running around with an umbilical cord today from a physical perspective as an adult, and yet many times there are attachments, these cords, that can be singular or literally like a cable, where they become so significant, each thread becoming another piece of attachment that becomes a very, very strong cable. This is extended even in your choice to give consideration to going out of body. There's often a concept that if you go out of body, that you need to remain corded to this body, and the idea that you can find yourself way back to the body. Is that true? Is that something that you even need to give consideration to? Do you really think that you'd become lost if you would cut the cord, sometimes reflected as a silver cord, in your choice to go out of body and realize that you have access to this body at any time that you desire? Your choice to remember that does not need to become held together through some kind of, again, cord. If you allow yourself to see and to really appreciate that that cord physically has been cut here, as an example for you choosing to become aware that this is something that you can create in this realm, giving yourself permission to decord or detach from those conditions that you have been taught to be real, gives you the opportunity to be enabled. And when we say enabled, the opportunity to become, of course, aware of who you are and to participate with us in a greater aspect of the light, the illumination that which is you. You must understand that we, the light, and you all coincide together. And yet, even in terms of the illumination that is you, in terms of the light, you don't need to be attached to that as if you need to somehow capture that or to put it in some kind of a jar to hold on to it, again, likens to the picket fence that was mentioned earlier. This idea that you need to possess love is something very important for you to give consideration to, because oftentimes this is something that you are found doing. That this love that you go to proclaim, that you identify it as, again, a brotherly love versus a sisterly love, or that which would be described as a love that you would have for a parent, mom or dad. And yet these attributes of love, as you go to categorize it, is something that you've done to help the mind to understand what kind of love, what participation that you're loving with in this particular way. And it doesn't have to be done. You don't need to be afraid of allowing yourself to truly engage fully without necessarily having to categorize all these different aspects of love. You will find that in your choice to detach from that categorization, it enables you to be, of course, much more free to exhibit truly who you are. Yet there's a fear. And the fear, of course, is that in this choice that you might give consideration to detach from this condition that you are to participate with your brother or your sister in this particular kind of way, it gives the credence that, of course, through that choice, through that attachment, through that corded venue, that you have to act in a certain kind of way. And that would be much like a puppet that has to move based upon certain kinds of strings that are very conditional in nature. And this is something that many of you are having to address in your personal relationships, including from the esoteric perspective. And you feel constrained, like somehow someone's pulling, and they quite literally are, in terms of pushing you this one direction or pulling you from another direction, and the idea that this is somehow how you are supposed to participate in acts of love. And yet we're here to encourage you that if it's your choice to realize that you don't have to participate in a love that is conditional, finite, and certainly limited through attachment, then you give yourself permission to see these cords that are not necessarily limited to, again, that which would be described as the belly button, that have indeed been cut physically as a means to physically and symbolically share with each one of you that that's something that is indeed supposed to be cut. Then your choice to engage as a complete and whole being in this space is deeply encouraged, and your allowance and your remembrance that you don't have to participate with any limitations. At the current moment, there is a shift in the awareness that people can love in a different kind of way. For example, the categorization of the box in terms of male, female, just in terms of personal identification, is, as it has been for infinitely long, has been not recognized. It always had to be perceivingly male or perceivingly female. But even from a physical perspective, in terms of those people who are born here, it isn't always limited to that kind of a box or that kind of limitation or that kind of categorization. The more popularized opening up the door of the idea that people can participate without having to be limited to one box versus another is something for you to understand. And your choice to no longer be attached to that I'm only male, or no longer to be attached to that I'm only female, realizing that if this is something that befits you in terms of this incarnation, of course, this is quite beautiful and something that you would want to appreciate. But if that's not what you've come here to express, you don't need to think that there's something wrong with you through the attachment that you're not necessarily trying to fit in this particular box. This is extremely important, because if you choose to become aware that you don't have to participate in any kind of limitation, even from an identification of who you are, then your choice to express outwardly becomes much easier. We could even use the term simpler. This state of simplicity is something that you would be encouraged to see, most of all feel, that you can exist in a state without having to try and position yourself in any kind of way, but rather you can just be relaxed as who you are, realizing that that state is not a vulnerable state unless you're attached to the idea, the concept that somehow by being you that you're going to get hurt, that someone's going to be shooting or attacking or trying to take something in one particular kind of way. This is to be reminded of you, because if you choose to exercise yourself in this indeed acute, most beautiful, loving way, you'll find that you can't be taken advantage of because, of course, your choice to be aware. This awareness comes through your being further open, does it not? For your choice to be very limited creates the very boundaries or the constraints of how you see, how you perceive, and thus how you create. If you choose to open up just a little bit, let alone completely, you'll find that there's no danger in existing in that state. We would use this as an example. Each body comes through, of course, the connection of the sperm and the egg to create a zygote, ultimately this child / a baby. In that space of love, no matter how it got created, in terms of a desired connection to happen that way or through an accident, it still came through this energy or this connection of love, which is beautiful. And if you can understand that if you came through this zygote, which everyone did in the physical form, whether that was done in the lab in terms of IVF versus naturally within someone's given body, or there was help where an egg was inseminated and then put back into the embodiment of a woman who carries the zygote, is really beautiful for you to understand, because that has nothing to do with ultimately the attributes of love. In essence, you don't need to be attached to how you came into form, because ultimately it doesn't matter, does it? If you choose to realize that that has nothing to do with really who you are, that if mom truly loves dad in this most beautiful, healthy, fairy tale kind of way, which is, of course, something that people choose, and sometimes people don't choose very consciously, that they want to come into a relationship where there was intimacy that wasn't necessarily created healthily, and yet here comes the child as a result of that. But you don't need to think or hold on to or attach to that old story, because, of course, in that space, it would create these cyclic patterns of you creating something very similar to what you were born into. We want to give you this with an enormous invitation. Think of red carpet specific to the a Hollywood premiere, where you're literally walking down a new path that has been laid out, and this is what's being extended to you in this particular moment, if you remain attentive to that. Loving without attachment doesn't have to be hard, but often it will be considered difficult, if not impossible, through the head. And your choice to realize that you can go much, much further than holding on to what has been the past, then of course you enable yourself to do something different. But even doing that may feel strange, as if you need to maintain the familiarity of what you have worn, and that would be described as the conditions, the finite conditions that you've become accustomed to. So giving yourself permission to invalidate those pieces that you think are you, that is the perceived self, enables you to get in touch with, of course, you and us in this this connected way. And your choice to realize that this connection is indeed infinite and without limitation, even to the idea that it needs to be described or categorized in one way versus another. If you must see that our love is so unconditional that we embrace literally everything that is taking place in this realm, and we give you, of course, through love, this attribute of free will choice to exhibit and to express any way that you choose. This is extremely important, because as you realize that there isn't one way in which you need to participate in active love, then you can literally go into what could be described as a meditative state or a connected state, and now, in essence, offering yourself to be able to remember that you don't have to participate in a certain kind of way, or ultimately perhaps even a box or a means in which you are supposed to identify yourself, that this is me in terms of how we're supposed to participate in an act of love. If you choose to realize that your coming here is much, much, much greater than having to be limited to these attributes of your past, in essence, these specific things that you become attached to, then you can breathe in something that might be described as different, but ultimately extremely beautiful in you realizing that in your choice to let go of these attachments, that you become free. In that state of freedom, you will find that if there is a box or a place or a means in which you find favorable to participate in love and even in acts of love, you'll find that those become very, very clear to you, the person. They don't have to be judged or approved of by somebody else. It's something that you give yourself permission to participate in because, of course, that's what you, in terms of your soul, has come to do in this embodiment. This understanding is extremely important so that you can let go of the idea that somehow that you're crazy or bad or that you need to only stay within the same kind of circles that you've perhaps grown up with. Isn't it interesting that oftentimes the very things that you have grown up appreciating as real indeed aren't? This is something to really appreciate, specific to even the paradigms of love, that all of that you've been exposed to from a love perspective, we would give you this thought, perhaps isn't necessarily true. We'll say that stronger. It isn't true at all. If you understand that the paradigms that you've come to participate with from a conditional perspective is to be acknowledged, yet it isn't the limitation. So anyone choosing to participate in a higher aspect of love within themselves, spiritually, certainly with us, and even in an interpersonal relationship, is yours to have in your choice to truly ask for it, which means the revealing of your true self, the honoring of who you are, and realizing that in your true self you clearly are this beautiful essence of love, in your choice to connect to it. Now we use the words connection, which is different than attaching. You don't have to grasp this attribute of who you are as much as understand and appreciate this is what you come to connect to and to manifest in this particular physical form. This is beautifully encouraged for you to give yourself permission without necessarily having to overprocess or overthink that somehow this is something that needs to be moderately done through almost like a stepping stone, that you go from one stage to the next stage to the next stage in terms of trying to give yourself permission to detach. Of course, this can be done, and oftentimes it is, but it isn't necessarily encouraged. What we're saying is that you can literally cut a cord, and by that choice, instantly be relieved of what we described as that cyclic pattern. That's something very important for you to feel and to understand as you continue to go forward. You do not need to be held back again through your attributes or your states of connection that you often confuse with, again, attachment. We want to, again, reiterate the concept that being attached is likened to a balloon that's tied or tethered, like a horse would be through the reins tethered to a fence post so that the horse can't move. Further, likened to a puppet where there's constraints in terms of how the individual moves. That would be you within your embodiment based upon these cords. And don't be fooled. These cords that we're speaking of, these states of attachment that you can see and that you can actually feel, and sometimes quite physically, but even oftentimes outside of the realm of the physical realm, in your choice to see those, you'll quickly learn that these cords aren't something that literally serve you. And you giving yourself permission to let go of these cords is, of course, all important so that you can truly be free. Free to discover, of course, who you are, and free to connect and interconnect with others in a more, shall we say, healthy way. Your choice to extend yourself in this realm, to participate in a state of union with one another, and certainly with the world at large, has to come from the cutting of these particular cords, these attachments. This cannot be done without you choosing to become aware. It doesn't mean that you have to go through every piece of awareness or every cord that you have chosen to be attached to, as much as realize that in this particular moment that these cords haven't and continue not to serve you. Giving yourself a permission, which is not necessarily through the mind or even through external individuals or even groups thereof, enables you to be present in this moment and realize that the love that we're offering you in this exact moment doesn't come with an attachment. You can ignore that which is being shared. You can receive this, and of course, way beyond what has been used in terms of even the individual aspects of words and this choice of English or this language that's being used to have this dialogue with you. You need to become aware that your choice to exist in love, in terms of the true you, is something that can come forth as you choose to realize that it doesn't have to come through the conditions of the past, which of course are very constraining. in this choice for you to continue to give yourself permission to be free of these past considerations, choices, cyclic patterns. This enables you to rise and come to a higher state. This is very important, and the reason that this message is being offered to you at this particular time, in terms of this framework of time, is because in this evolution, in terms of the entirety of this globe, there has been a desire to continue to evolve. We didn't say it's not a revolutionary concept per se, but it could be if this is something that you would allow, that you would literally allow these attachments to be let go in a hurried space, not in the sense that you have to do it in a hurried way, but that you would give yourself more freedom than having to climb or escalate very slowly. In the concept of the entire globe or the entire world, there is a concept that you're having to address in terms of letting go of these attributes of the past. This is why the ego, or the sense of self, has become so loud. This is why you're seeing it in the political divisions and or the groups of all individuals worldwide. And this is something for you to see. This has been going on, of course, forever. But there's becoming a higher state of awareness in this attribute of participation. We want to mention this as well, that you don't have to be controlled, which is, of course, not just a chord, but a significant chord, and your choice to participate in a certain kind of way to exist, let's say, in an intimate relationship. In essence, you don't have to do something to participate in a state of intimacy. As a male, it's not my job, or nor is it my responsibility to participate in certain kinds of things that may be even predetermined by the Western society in which I live, that I have to do these things to participate in a relationship. Of course I don't. And your choice to realize this, to realize those conditions and begin to take the awareness and to let them go either individually and or once collectively to let them drop, it enables you to, of course, set yourself free. Now, it may mean that you are changing the dynamic or the vibration or the kind of relationship that you're in. And this is something to appreciate, because you don't need to think that that's somehow bad or that you may lose the relationship. If you give yourself permission to understand that your choice to be yourself in the loving state that you are, and to engage with others in that state, in a state of empowerment and strength, you don't have to give consideration to what is the shell or the egoic sense that somehow you're going to be punished or that you're going to have a consequence for that. This cause and effect kind of a thinking, of course, is something for you to appreciate. And the idea that this patterning is developed by the mind because, of course, it doesn't have the capacity to really take everything in. In essence, you don't have the capacity to really feel the love that we're offering you in this exact moment because, again, of your conditioning and your direct attachments. If you're willing to let go and really open yourself up, then you'll find that your ability to receive those messages, those desires that you want to express in this realm, of course, it becomes a very different fertile ground in which you can participate in your aspects of creation. Do understand that all creation is done through love. A very easy concept. Light is, of course, a modality where love is quite literally carried. In essence, a medium, a construct, if you will, a pipeline in which love is shared. And of course, it's not limited to that in terms of the light itself. But that concept, for you to literally bathe or participate in attributes of the light, is something that's deeply encouraged. And of course, is that limited or is that constrained to how you should or how you could or how you would give yourself permission to do that or not permission to do that? Is something for you to review and give consideration to. And just the awareness that you, again, are boxing yourself down to different kinds of love based upon the conditions, most of the time, of the people who have shared these conditions or these thoughts with you. Oftentimes in the idea that somehow this box or this means or this picket fence that you surround your love with is right. And it isn't. There's no such thing. You don't need to participate in any attribute of holding on to the concept of any kind of love, because in true love, there's a fluidity that you don't need to control. You don't need to have a contractual arrangement, which is often done through what you call marriage. That structure is what it is, but it doesn't need to be something that confines the two based upon how they participate in their choice to love. Your means of loving one another doesn't need to be limited in the physical realm as much as it doesn't need to be ruled or constrained in the metaphysical realm. As you understand this, and especially if you choose to understand the metaphysical examples, then of course you can bring that into the physical, and again appreciate what you've come here to do in terms of how you are to participate, and realize that that might feel very, very balanced for you, and it may or may not for some member within the same family tree. But you don't need to think of that as bad, or that somehow they're doing it wrong, or that you're doing it right. That attribute, which of course is an attachment to the perceived self, is not real. Indeed, it will die as the body is released, and the mind will go with that, and because of that, you will return to the highest aspects of love. If this is something that you truly desire, give yourself permission to continue to be aware that you don't need to hold on to the falsehoods of what you've been putting forth in terms of story and or attributes of belief, in terms of what you should, what you could, or how you can or can't participate in love. If you truly see what's being shared here, you can exist in the highest state of allowing yourself to be truly detached. In this choice of detachment, you truly free yourself from any distractions. In your choice to free yourself from any distractions, then you are free to go forward to create what it is that you really come here to do. This is very, very important as you continue to exist in this time. This is why, again, you're having to address so significantly these attributes of the past, so that you can let go of these previous relationships, these previous stories, this previous aspect of the lineages that have taught you. That would be parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, etc., that you do not need to participate in that kind of conditioned or blocked means, or those hierarchies of what you should or shouldn't do based upon those who might be reflected as your elders. As you get in touch with this, then you can to not just to examine, but to truly observe that this is not something that you've come here to do. And letting go of these attributes of the past can be very, very perceivingly uncomfortable to the shell, or that which would be described as the ego, because of course it may think that somehow it's going to lose everything. And this, of course, is something common that you will hear within yourself, or perhaps you would hear it with other people, where they say, well, you're going to lose your relationship with your son or your daughter or your significant other. And, of course, this can be true if this is something you hold on to as a belief, but it isn't. If it does take place, that someone distances themselves from you because of your choice to become even more loving, then you can appreciate that. But not as something that you have done bad, but as an escalation of, again, who you really are. And of course, there's always going to feel best within you, even in the idea that someone may pull away. And you're understanding that this is something that you truly want, meaning that you give yourself permission to truly exist in this highest form of love, then you can exist in truth as who you are, and you'll find that others find you, participate with you naturally, and of course very easily, in the same way that two people might hold hands with their state of oneness that is energetically felt by anyone that walks by. This can be seen on the street, where you watch certain people hold hands, and you can find themselves very disconnected, and yet you can find others who are holding hands in a detached way, meaning lovingly connecting, but not necessarily having to be dependent upon each party. And of course, that's the difference. It's something that we want you to recognize. If this is something that you're willing to give consideration to, honor the fact that you do not need to be limited in the way that you participate in acts of love, in your choice to really be free within yourself, to discover that these things of your past are not important. And clearly, they are only at best fragments of memories, because of course you can't even attach or connect to the memory beyond what we've described as the mind. And that's what you continue to hear in this particular era of time, especially now, where this is being escalated. And the reason it's being escalated is so that you can hear it. You can become aware of all of this noise that perhaps has been underneath your table of consciousness. And we're raising that noise so that you can see it. And of course, we're showing it to you in many different formats, so you can become really aware, if it's your choice, to realize that you need to participate in that way. Which includes this fact that, of course, love is not limited to this duality. Duality in terms of course, as we talked about in the very beginning, that there has to be a duality of male energy versus female energy in two different genders, in terms of male versus female. It can be done, of course, within the same sex. Oftentimes, however, even within the same sex, there is a desire within the same sex to create a polarization, that someone may choose to participate in a connected way to their masculinity, regardless of their gender. This is something to recognize. And it's something to also recognize that they may not stay there, that they may find themselves attracted to the gender energy of male and exhibit that for a period of time, only wanting to find out that they want to switch and participate in the feminine aspects of them being themselves in that space, again, irregardless of the gender. This is something important for you to understand. This is all being heightened for your awareness in this particular time so that you don't have to continue to attach to the idea that this is right and this is wrong, and you can continue to let go in terms of becoming aware of what you come here to participate in. What other people are doing is really not relevant as much as you giving yourself permission to become aware of what it is that you've come here to do. And if it is to connect to higher aspects of love, then you don't have to condition yourself through the past in the idea that somehow you have to do it in some kind of branded way, which includes what you've done historically. There is a pattern that you can see from the very first moments as you started to create your relationships, and that pattern is most likely, if not perfectly clear today as it was in the very beginning. This is the whole point, to see that, to appreciate that, and at the same time let go in the idea that that doesn't have to be something that you remain attached to, likens to the cord that was cut in the very beginning, the umbilical cord, so that you can truly be free to do what you come here to do. This choice is significant. Significant for this moment, significant for each of you to give consideration to this, and significant for the community at large, because, of course, how can we offer unconditional love to a world that is finitely constrained, specific to the conditions, the mind that they've been born into? If you understand the nature of what we're sharing, then you will enable yourself to perhaps stretch at the very least, and then ultimately give yourself permission to go way beyond quote-unquote stretching and just literally blow out what will be described as the perceived parameters, constrictions, perhaps even in some ways structure, in which you've been participating in acts of love. This is something that's deeply encouraged, and it's something that we would give you consideration to reevaluate within yourself outside of what you've done historically. If it's time for you to reveal yourself in a different kind of way, energetically, and especially in the communion of interpersonal love, then give yourself awareness to what has been done so that you can let go of anything that's in the way, slowing you down or constraining you, and your choice to be untied and to be reconnected. You'll find that in this space, there's the highest aspects of potential within you that gets to be realized in this world. As we speak of the word love, we're of course talking about any attribute in which you would go to create it in terms of any of your interpersonal relationships. But you must understand that this concept of this word is where all things are created. Of course, when we speak of the way that humans reproduce, it's done through an attribute of love. Correct. Yet, it's much bigger than that. So you understanding that in the energy of this love, that all things are made manifest, the more that you become in harmony with, quote, our love, which is divine love, you will find that your ability to create becomes much, much easier. One could say that you become a master of this particular plane, which is an interesting concept in terms of language. But if you could appreciate that the modality of being here doesn't have to constrain you through this would-be attachment because you're a human being and you've chosen to do that, then of course you begin to, we could use the term ascend, outside of this limitation, which is the very thing that we're asking you to do today. In your consideration to realize that you don't have to continue to participate in gaining approval, most of all through the perceived mind or the templates of what you can or can't do based upon, again, previous patterns of the past. We want to welcome you to the highest aspects of the vibrations that are here for you to have in your choice to realize it. You don't need to be afraid, but giving yourself conscious awareness to become aware that your essence here does not need to be limited to the human form, even the perceived identity in terms of what you might use as a name. If you choose to blow out of that and truly exhibit in a completely different way, you'll find that going forward, it's indeed much, much different. This is something that's deeply encouraged, and we wanted to encourage you not to be afraid of it, or especially not to create any states of resistance in the idea that somehow you need to further protect, meaning bigger picket fences, if you will, to try and protect, quote, your love. Indeed, think of that as a concept. Is it indeed something that you possess that would be described as your relationship? Is it something that you can limit to a certificate, such as a marriage certificate, that my love or our love or your love in terms of that kind of interconnection is limited to that particular certificate? based upon whom? Someone else giving you permission to exist in that particular state, which is, again, interesting. Do we need permission from another party? That would be a governing party to tell you that it's okay for you to love in whatever way that you choose to. You will find that your choice to be in the highest aspects of love, of course, come with complete and utter respect, which means there's not a need to take or grasp or again, attach in some kind of unkind way. You'll find that there's a fear sometimes within people's minds that their choice to be in this unlimited state, that would mean that there would be the further manifestation of, let's say, the pedophile kind of energy, where that energy would be attacking that of an undeveloped soul in the embodiment of perhaps a baby. And of course, that's not true. Instead of allowing what has been allowed in that kind of energetic state, when we step into this kind of awareness of you choosing to truly become aware, then there is no space for that kind. Think of it like a field where there's no space for that kind of energy to manifest because of its highly imbalanced state. This is something for you to understand as well, because many of you have had very, very challenging, if not difficult, experiences, attributes of love, sometimes what could be involved with regards to abuse, and certainly even attributes of sexual abuse, which creates a confusion in terms of your identity, in terms of how you came here, and what you can or can't do based upon this event or these events at large. It can create a very imbalanced state within you. And yet ultimately this isn't you, whether it was a one-time experience or an infraction that was done on a massage table, or if it was something that was much, much greater than that, even repeatedly. If this is something that gets detached from, that you choose to detach from, then of course it sets you free. And then through that awareness, through your awareness, through our awareness within you, of course, you have the ability to see some kind of energy like that coming your way before it comes into your venue in terms of your embodiment, and certainly in your desire. Therefore, you giving yourself permission to be even more loving gives you more awareness to see what's coming your way and who's participating in a healthy way versus not. Of course, those of the predatory nature are always trying to do so in the dark or in ways that they're not seen, and this is very much their nature from an energetic perspective as well as from a physical perspective, even from a psychological perspective. If this is something that you want to step behind, then stepping into this attribute of being in unconditional love without necessarily carrying those stories, even if they weren't yours. For example, sometimes someone may choose to be attached to an event that happened to a brother or a sister or a mom and her dad when it's not their event, not their something that they physically with their embodiment went through. And letting go of that as a detached state, of course, enables them to be present, to participate in a different kind of way. These things are being shared with you specific to now so that you can truly be free to engage in love from us in a completely different way. We're never going to offer you any kind of control in terms of how you should or shouldn't participate. We want to give you the remembrance of what you've come here to do through this form, through this format of allowing yourself to exist in the highest state of you being you. In your choice to exist in this way, you will find that there is great pleasure in every aspect of your engagement. This is something that does not need to be limited, and we hope this finds you well in your choice to receive this without necessarily having to create a rebuttal and the idea that you needed to give thought to what is being said. You can, of course, but if you give yourself permission to really feel, to digest the energy that was being shared, there's nothing to really have to give consideration to beyond the acceptance, which of course is our honor to share on your behalf, if this is something that you're willing to receive. In this moment, on this closing moment, it's important for you to understand that you do not need to be afraid of the divine love that is ours to share with you, and when it gets to be reflected to you in the corpuscles or the individuals who participate with you, that doesn't need to be categorized as desired good, and then again put a picket fence on around it and the idea that somehow someone's going to attack it or take it away. If this is something that you can continue to detach from, that enables you to be free in this particular moment to exist in a higher state of vibration, which is deeply encouraged for you individually and for the collective. You don't need to be afraid that somehow you need to maintain your relationships through the yearly reminder, such as an anniversary, and the idea that you need to be attached to that, because of course that's not important either. Your being present is more important than you being attached to wanting to, shall we say, present your love through many years of being together as perceivingly better than someone that may or may not have done it that way. And your choice to exist in this state, in terms of really being connected to the highest aspects of love, you'll find what you've been looking for. A reconnection of the highest kind. It will take care of all these attributes of the past in terms of you choosing to be detached from it. We welcome you to this space because it's very important in this particular part of your journey now. Take advantage of this opportunity to realize that there are no conditions in your choice to love. Wow, right? I did quite a bit of channeling before we started with the subject matter, so I knew that was going to go fast. I'm sure that's something that I hope that you'll want to replay and listen to and really feel. But it's a significant moment for us to be invited in that way. I'm very grateful for you being here again, and I hope this love that is being shared with you is something that you can feel and that you want to further develop, and of course share it in all the interpersonal ways that you want to do so, in whatever way that you want. But it's a most beautiful, beautiful gift, and you must realize that I'll say everyone that's paying attention to this, and I say everyone because everyone will be attracted to this. The people who aren't attracted to this, I couldn't say that to. But if you're attracted to what's going on here, then you're going to find yourself to be, of course, a very, very, very loving being. And you turning that up versus trying to manage that or, keeping it held down or underneath, the idea that we need to be careful with it is going to change the game. And so if you're really wanting to dare yourself to do something really compulsively beautiful, but it's not really a dare, it's not necessarily dangerous, it's literally allowing, which is receiving, this love to come to you. I think most of you remember my literally crying last time in terms of when I was giving the presentation, because in my spiritual COVID-19 retreat, I was further reduced, if I can say it from a physical perspective, to become aware of the love that was coming to me just via you. And I still feel very, very emotional about that. And it's not that it hasn't been there all along. It's just I'm choosing to become more aware of it. And because of more awareness, then, of course, it creates an opportunity for us to reciprocate in a beautiful, and I have to use this term, a respectful way. This is why we don't need to be afraid of someone wanting to poach or take or possess our love in whatever ways that would be. Because when we step into higher aspects of awareness, that becomes impossible, literally impossible. We just literally say no to someone who's not participating in that way. And, of course, when we talk about the illumination of the light, that kind of energy doesn't ever want to be in the light, so we don't have to give that undue consideration. A lot to give thought to, most importantly, real choice to in terms of your going forward, and I hope it has tremendous value to you. I'm so grateful for you to be here. I continue to thank you for your participation personally and certainly globally as we continue to knit and tie together to participate in a state of oneness. Thank you very much.